What's up, class? Today we have our very own special guest, Miss Leisha Scott. Leisha is a mixed media artist. She's a mom, she's an entrepreneur, and she's an overall fantastic person to know. So get ready because you guys just saw some of her work. So get ready to get introduced to her as who she is as an artist and her inspirations. Welcome,
Hey,
Leisha. How are you?
hi Kyle, how are you?
I'm well. So we saw a whole bunch of different artworks you have. And to my understanding, you consider yourself an abstract artist, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So as far as your process goes, what would you say is your starting block to your process as creating?
Well, because I do so many different types of work, my process can look very differently depending on what it is what type of project I'm working on. So whether that be collage work or whether that be the coasters that were shown there, or if it's a painting, the process will look a little differently with each. But I always start with color. So regardless of what it is I'm working on, it always starts with color, my color palette, making sure that I have my main colors, my complementaries, and then I take it from there.
That's pretty cool that you're saying you start with colors because recently in class we covered all different forms of color theory. And I talk to my students about how color theory really works together to really push forth your art and push forth the colors where they have vibrations together. It makes something look more vibrant, more saturated. So what about specific colors? Because you have so many different color palettes that you use, is there a specific process you go through with picking specific color palettes for your work?
Oh, absolutely. So it really depends on what I'm inspired by at the moment. So typically it is emotion based. And there's different colors that will correspond to the emotions that I'm going through. And every now and then it can be based on seasons or nature, that will go ahead. So if it's not one, it's the other. And I'll start first with a tone. So do I want to work on something that's going to be neutrals? Do I want to work on warm colors? Do I want to work on muted tones, which is probably what I've been dabbling in most lately? Um, and so I'll start first with the tone, and then I'll pick my first color, and then just kind of, well, that's when chaos comes to play in the studio, because then I take a little bit of everything. I'll take like my pastel crayons, and I'll take paints, and really I'll start with maybe one or two colors and then just play around, and I'll have like first picks and then like final drafts, and and until I get down to the colors that I want. And I do have here like what it looks like when, so like I'll have my little color palette. So like right now this is, I don't know how well the lighting is showing it, but this is the color palette that I'm working on currently. And there's like some blues, teals, sage greens, olives, and like neutral beige tones. Um, so this is my final draft. It was a hot mess prior to coming to this. So
But that's an amazing thing to see that you work through your artistic process because as we're learning about different things in art, we also always go over our planning approach as artists. And every artist has their own planning approach to get to that final product. And so to see that you say you go and you do a whole organized chaos and you allow yourself to explore and you allow yourself to put your emotion inside of your work and inside of the color picking process is really something that's super dope and super amazing to see as it builds to your final result because your final results are amazing, they're gorgeous, and to see and understand behind the scenes process, because a lot of times people see the end result
Mhm.
and they may think there wasn't much thought that went into it. There wasn't a lot of things that you do. And a lot of times with abstract artists, I know I've heard a couple of my students say it, oh yeah, I just throw some paint on the canvas and I'm an abstract artist. But there's so much more that you're saying goes into the process, and so much thought that goes into the process that allows people to really engage and feel your work.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit that on the head. I think process is so important. There emotion is just one part. I mean, there's the color planning, there's how much texture do I want, how many layers do I want. It's a lot more than just, I know it can look, it's like this is just like one big mess, but there is a function behind that mess and a process behind it. So you're
Yeah.
totally right there.
And you can tell that it's not just a chaos, but it's an organized, systematic thing you do with your work, because all your work has a feel to it. They all kind of vibrate and flow together very well. So you can tell your style. And I told my students several times before, like, everybody has their own style. It's
Mhm.
up to you to develop it. So, what would you say was the defining moment where you felt you found your style?
That is a oh, that's such a good question. I would say that honestly that didn't start until now with COVID. And that's just because of the amount of commitment that I was able to put into my work. So I've been painting now for 7 years, and my art journey began long beyond. I mean, I was always fascinated with art since I was a child. It was my go-to favorite thing to do, and it intensified throughout my teenage years. And then I lost it for a bit and reconnected to it about 7 years ago.
Wow.
And my style 7 years ago was not at all what it is today. It was actually I started off with more of like a Tim Burton kind of feel, which is very different from what I make now. But throughout COVID, it really was just timing. Things fell into play different. I worked remote, and so that gave me more time to have to be able to pour into my work. And along that, I moved, and that move allowed me to be able to have a studio space that just enables me to be able to be more creative and make the messes that I needed to make, and work on multiple projects sometimes at once. And so having more space and the time to be able to dedicate to it really expanded on both my technique and skill set, but also how I connect to my own work. I think that's super important. Um, yeah, so that was pretty much where I started to develop and see my style come to be.
So, when you say, I heard you mention studio space, right? And not having a specific area or specific space set up previously, but being able to move and organize a space that is solely your studio space. How important do you feel it is as to function as an artist to have a designated area that is meant for you to create? Do you feel it helps to inspire, or do you feel it helps you to kind of like grow as an artist and flow? Because so many people are trying to figure out how to set up studio
Mhm,
spaces in the environment that they may have. So, like for instance, a student setting up a studio space in their room,
mhm.
what would your advice be for them?
To do it, really just to do it. Give yourself grace. Know that it's okay to get started and not beat yourself up about it. And that it's okay if there's moments that you don't feel inspired because of where you are. That is okay too. I had to have a lot of conversations with myself because there are moments that you're going to feel discouraged, and art is so emotion based that if you're not inspired at the moment, you can't create, right? And so when I started 7 years ago, I didn't I was Oh my goodness. I was living with family and I was painting at night on on a couch. Really, I had like one little piece of a couch and one little space of a floor, and I would lay mats down and paint. And then it just evolved. I mean, I went from that space into moving into my own apartment and my dining room. I didn't have a dining room. That was where I would paint. And then I moved again, and I had this space underneath my staircase that was unutilized, and that's where I would go ahead and paint. So wherever I was at, even if it wasn't a large space, I did have a space. It might have only been, smaller than my physical body, and I'm all of 5 feet, and that was it. But it was mine,
Yeah.
and it was my little piece of chaos. But I think it is important to set a space for yourself, because even if you're just going over to the other side of your bedroom, right? Like, that's mentally, it's where you're letting go. It's where you're saying, in this space, I'm going to put my music, I'm going to vibe, I'm going to, whatever that looks like for you, tying up your hair, changing into something more comfortable. It is an entire experience that you're setting up for. And um and and then laying out your things, being prepared, your materials, and gathering that up. And the rest, so what? You don't care. You don't care that there's a bed behind you. You don't care that there's a closet behind you. You don't care if your siblings are in the next room and they're loud. Who cares? All of that
Mhm.
you're able to let go. So
Yeah,
give yourself grace, know that it's okay, and you're not alone. We all get started in a very similar way to what your story likely is.
definitely. I'm glad you said that because as long as it's inside of you to create, um, you can allow yourself to build that space
Mhm.
and you bring the temperature in the room that you desire. So you bring those talents, you bring those gifts, and you bring them to the room so that you can freely be you. So, one last question for you. If you could inspire someone who is struggling in their journey of creativity, in their journey of finding themselves as an artist, what words of inspiration would you provide to that person, that student?
I would say allow allow art to give back to you. Art is therapeutic, and so it's not just what you're putting out there for others. It's about what it's pouring back into you as well.
Yes,
And I think that's like key. If you keep that at the forefront, then everything that you are making is sincere, it's genuine, it's a story. You'll be able to see yourself evolve through it and reflect back on that growth process. So I think that you just have to know that it's okay to be in the space that you're in at that moment, and just let it go and create and look back. Once you look back, you will be so glad, and you do reach a point where
definitely.
that will kind of help propel you and keep you going, because you know that there will always be a look back. Today, you're looking back at yourself a year ago. 5 years from now, you're going to be looking at today, and what you think is you're looking at like, man, I've really grown, this is great. 5 years from now, you're going to look back at today and say, oh Lord, and I kept on growing, and thank you, thank God I
Yeah,
did, and I kept going with it. So it's constant evolution, and it's your story.
definitely. That I couldn't have said that better myself because the constant evolution and letting the art speak back to you and give back to you, there's so many different therapeutic approaches that we get from art. And it allows us to kind of like involve ourselves and engulf ourselves in it, that it can heal you in the
Hmm.
places that you've been hurt, in the places that you've been stagnant. So allow the art to speak back to you just as you speak to it. And that's a major thing for people to be able to just free themselves. And art is freedom. So I tell my students all the time, art is freedom. You're free to create whatever it is you can express.
Yep.
Express it. So I'm glad you said that, Leisha. I honor you and I thank you for being here on today. Tell our people where they can find your artwork.
Oh, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. I know everybody's on Instagram. So
Yes.
Leisha Scott Designs is where you can go ahead and find me. And it's Leisha.Scott.Designs. And you can check me out there.
Okay, awesome. So, guys, check her out on IG. Make sure that you see her work. It's super dope. Get inspired. Get in the place where you'll be inspired to use colors to express yourself creatively. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you guys next time.